Here's part 1 expanded into a fast-paced, emotional, single-paragraph story of about 1,000 words, simple English, clean, suitable for YouTube storytelling. Emma leaned on the balcony railing, her fingers brushing against the cool metal as the city lights stretched below her like tiny golden stars. The evening air was crisp, carrying distant sounds of traffic, occasional laughter from neighbors, and the faint hum of a car engine fading away in the streets. She had poured herself a cup of tea, hoping the quiet would calm her restless thoughts, but the warmth in her hands did little to soothe the tight knot in her chest. Life had been moving fast lately. David, her husband, had been working late hours, caught up in endless meetings and phone calls, and she often found herself alone in the apartment with nothing but her own thoughts. She loved her husband dearly, but solitude had begun to feel heavier than she expected, the kind of loneliness that presses softly against the ribs, not painful but impossible to ignore. She stared at the skyline, the glow of windows in nearby buildings, imagining the stories of lives unfolding inside them, each one separate yet oddly familiar in their quiet struggles and joys. That's when she heard the soft click of the sliding balcony door behind her, a sound so subtle she almost didn't register it. She turned slowly, her heart giving an unexpected lurch when she saw Michael standing there, framed by the warm light of the living room. He looked hesitant, unsure, yet his presence was calm, familiar, and oddly grounding. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said, his voice gentle, carrying that quiet weight he always had when he spoke to her. Michael, her husband's best friend, was someone she had known for years, someone who had shared countless dinners, coffee runs, and late-night conversations with David and occasionally with her. He had always been polite, friendly, supportive, the kind of person who made others feel at ease, yet today there was a different quality in him, something heavier, more vulnerable. Emma managed a polite smile, trying to hide the sudden flutter in her chest, unsure why seeing him here, unannounced, stirred such unexpected emotions. Michael stepped closer to the railing, his hands resting lightly on the edge, and for a moment, the city seemed to blur, the noise fading into a soft background hum as their eyes met. He hesitated, then spoke again. "I needed to talk, if that's okay." Emma's curiosity piqued, mixed with a twinge of caution, because this was unusual. Michael never barged in, never interrupted her quiet moments. Yet something in his tone told her this was important, something he had been carrying for a while and could no longer keep inside. She nodded slightly, her pulse quickening, and silently invited him into this shared space, this balcony that had become her sanctuary for reflection. He leaned against the railing beside her, not too close but not distant either, creating a space that felt intimate and fragile at the same time. The city stretched endlessly beneath them, each light twinkling like a secret waiting to be uncovered, and she felt an unspoken tension hanging between them, a mixture of anticipation, curiosity, and a quiet emotional pull she could not yet name. Michael's eyes were focused on the horizon, as if searching for courage in the distant glow of the skyline, and she found herself noticing small details she had never observed before, the way his jaw tightened slightly, the subtle crease in his brow, the softness in his gaze that contradicted his composed posture. He finally took a breath, the exhale loud in the stillness of the night, and said, "There's something I've been meaning to tell you for a long time, something personal." Emma's heart skipped. She wasn't sure what she expected from this visit, but the seriousness in his voice made her realize that whatever it was, it wasn't casual or trivial. Her mind raced with possibilities, none of which prepared her for the weight she felt settling over her shoulders, the kind that accompanies truth ready to be shared, secrets that can change perspectives, hearts, or the unspoken dynamics of relationships. The wind rustled lightly through the balcony, brushing past them, carrying the scent of evening jasmine from the neighbors' potted plants, and for a moment, the world felt suspended, holding its breath along with them. She tried to steady herself, gripping her teacup a little tighter, feeling the warmth seep through her fingers, grounding her while her mind spun. I needed you to hear this, Michael continued, finally turning his gaze to her, eyes meeting hers fully now, raw and unshielded. Emma nodded slowly, silently urging him to speak, though a part of her was wary. What did this mean? Why now? And what would it change? The balcony seemed smaller suddenly, the space between them charged with unspoken emotion, history, and the fragile possibility of connection. As Michael hesitated, she realized that she wasn't only listening to words that were about to be spoken, she was sensing vulnerability, honesty, and perhaps a shift in a dynamic she hadn't expected to consider, and it made her pulse beat faster, her thoughts scatter, and yet remain painfully focused on the quiet gravity of the moment. He cleared his throat, a small sound, almost nervous, and in that pause, Emma felt the weight of years of friendship, of countless conversations, of shared laughs and empathy that had built a subtle bridge between them over time. There was something about the way he looked at her now, a mixture of respect and yearning, that made her chest tighten, emotions she thought she could control suddenly brushing past the surface. She wanted to speak, to ask a question, to understand why he had come, but words felt inadequate, and the only thing she could do was nod, silently giving him permission to share what had been hidden for so long. The city lights reflected in his eyes, and for a heartbeat, Emma wondered if the world had contracted to just this balcony, just this moment, just the quiet tension that wrapped them like an invisible thread. Michael's voice finally broke the pause, low and deliberate, carrying an honesty she hadn't anticipated, and in that instant, Emma realized that nothing would feel the same after this night, that something delicate and unspoken between them had begun to stir, and the night held them suspended, balanced between past, present, and the possibilities of what honesty might bring. Here's part 2 expanded into a fast-paced, emotional, single-paragraph story of about 1,000 words, simple English, clean. Suitable for YouTube storytelling. Michael leaned on the balcony railing beside Emma, the city lights flickering like tiny lanterns far below, and for a long moment, neither spoke, letting the quiet stretch between them, heavy with unspoken words and lingering tension. He finally exhaled, a soft breath that seemed to carry the weight of all the thoughts he had kept bottled inside for years, and when he spoke, his voice was low, hesitant, almost fragile. Emma, I've never shared this with anyone, not even David. I wasn't sure I could, but it's been pressing on me for so long that I can't keep it in anymore. Emma's heart fluttered unpredictably, a strange mix of curiosity, nervousness, and something deeper she didn't want to name. She turned slightly to face him, noticing the subtle shift in his expression, the softness in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, and the careful way he measured his words as if each one carried enormous importance. I've always admired you, he admitted quietly, not with arrogance or recklessness, but with raw honesty that made her chest tighten and her throat feel heavy. There's this strength in you, this kindness, this light you carry even when life feels heavy. I've always noticed it, always appreciated it, and I never knew how to say it before. Emma's fingers unconsciously tightened around the edge of the railing, the warmth of the metal grounding her while her mind spun with the gravity of his words. She remembered all the times Michael had been there, supporting David, offering help when she least expected it, sharing laughs, comforting words, and a quiet understanding that sometimes only he seemed to offer. Now, hearing him confess feelings that were more than just admiration, more than simple friendship, she felt a rush of emotions she hadn't anticipated, surprise, longing, confusion, and the subtle stirrings of something dangerously tender. She wanted to speak, to ask why, to question if this was a fleeting vulnerability or a truth long suppressed, but the night, the city, the soft hum of distant traffic, and the stars above held her silent, compelling her to just listen, to just feel. Michael's voice continued, softer now, almost a whisper, I don't expect anything to change, I just needed you to know. I needed to be honest, even if it's only for my own peace of mind. There's so much I've kept inside, things I could never say without feeling selfish or foolish, but the truth is, my admiration, my feelings, they'd been there all along. Emma's mind raced, the weight of his confession settling over her in waves, stirring memories of laughter, moments of quiet connection, the subtle ways he had always seemed to understand her unspoken thoughts, the comforting presence he had always carried, and now the undeniable intensity of his honesty. She noticed the way his gaze lingered on her, not intrusive, but searching, a silent hope in his eyes that she might understand, that she might not judge, that she might feel some part of what he felt. The night air carried a faint chill, and she shivered slightly, though not from cold. Her heart felt both heavy and alive, the adrenaline of emotions rushing through her veins, leaving her both exhilarated and apprehensive. For the first time, she truly saw Michael, not just as David's friend, not just as someone polite and reliable, but as a person with depth, vulnerability, and an emotional honesty that was almost frightening in its intensity. "I know this might be complicated," he continued, "and I don't want to create problems. I respect you, I respect David, and I don't want to hurt anyone. But hiding this inside has been unbearable, and I couldn't stand it another day without telling you." Emma felt a lump in her throat, torn between gratitude for his honesty and the realization that hearing such a confession was opening doors she didn't know existed, doors that led to feelings and possibilities she had never allowed herself to imagine. She wanted to speak, to reassure him, to somehow comfort him and herself at the same time, but the words stuck, trapped under the weight of the moment, leaving only her silence and the steady, unflinching gaze she returned to him. Michael shifted slightly, leaning closer without breaking the unspoken boundary, the faint scent of his cologne mingling with the cool night air, making her heart beat faster and more erratically than she had expected. He glanced at the city below, as if drawing courage from its distant lights, then back at her, and she felt the pull of 1,000 unspoken emotions, friendship, admiration, longing, and a subtle romantic tension that neither could define yet both could feel. "Emma," he whispered finally, "I needed you to know who I am, who I've been under the surface of friendship, the side of me no one has seen. You've always been different. Special. And I couldn't hide this anymore." Her fingers tightened around the railing as her mind replayed every memory, every shared smile, every supportive gesture, every glance that had seemed ordinary before but now took on a deeper, more intimate meaning. She realized that Michael's honesty had shifted something between them, not in a reckless way, but in a quiet, profound manner that demanded acknowledgement, understanding, and perhaps a careful reckoning of boundaries and emotions. The night seemed to hold its breath, the distant sounds of the city fading into a soft, blurred hum as Emma considered the depth of Michael's words, the vulnerability he had shown, and the gentle, aching sincerity of his confession. For a long moment, silence stretched again, but it was no longer empty, it was alive with the electricity of emotions unspoken, feelings laid bare, and the possibility of connection beyond what either had imagined. Emma wanted to respond, to reassure, to acknowledge, yet she also understood that some confessions were meant to be felt first, absorbed, and reflected upon before any words could do them justice. She drew in a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill her lungs, grounding her while the emotional storm swirled quietly beneath the surface, a tender ache that left her both unsettled and alive. Michael's gaze never wavered, he waited patiently, respectfully, letting her take the space she needed, yet the intensity in his eyes conveyed the depth of what he had shared and the quiet hope that some part of her understood, even if she couldn't speak it aloud. The balcony, the city lights, the faint rustle of wind through nearby trees, and the shared silence became a cocoon of intimacy, emotional honesty, and quiet tension, and Emma realized that this night, this confession, would leave a mark she could never erase, a memory she would carry with her, fragile, powerful, and transformative in ways she hadn't anticipated. And as the night deepened, she knew the conversation had only begun. The emotional truth Michael had shared was a seed planted in both their hearts, delicate yet undeniable, promising further moments of reflection, revelation, and perhaps a connection that was waiting quietly to be explored, though carefully, tenderly, and with full respect for the lives they both cherished. Here's part 3 expanded into a fast-paced, emotional, single-paragraph story of about 1,000 words, simple English, clean. Suitable for YouTube storytelling. Emma's chest felt tight as she absorbed Michael's words, the confession hanging between them like a fragile thread that could snap or pull them closer in equal measure, and for a moment, all she could do was breathe slowly, trying to steady the rush of emotions coursing through her. The city below twinkled innocently, oblivious to the quiet storm on the balcony, where two hearts were navigating a delicate terrain of honesty, longing, and subtle romantic tension. She looked at him, really looked, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes, the way his hands rested lightly on the railing, his posture a mix of composure and uncertainty, and she realized she had never noticed him quite like this before, never truly seen the weight of feelings he had carried silently, respecting boundaries while longing for connection. Her mind replayed countless moments with him, the late nights when he had stayed to help David with work, the quiet encouragement he had offered when she doubted herself, the warmth in his smile when he acknowledged small victories or gestures she hadn't thought anyone noticed, and suddenly all those moments carried a new depth, a tenderness she had never fully recognized until now. "Michael," she started, her voice barely above a whisper, unsure how to articulate the swirl of emotions inside her, unsure whether to encourage, deny, or simply sit with the truth he had laid bare. He met her gaze steadily, patiently, with a soft intensity that made her pulse quicken, and she felt herself drawn into the gravity of the moment, caught between admiration, affection, curiosity, and an undeniable emotional pull she couldn't easily name. "You don't have to say anything," he said gently, anticipating the words she struggled to find, "I just needed you to know. I couldn't keep this inside any longer without feeling like I was hiding from myself, from the truth of who I am, and who I feel." His honesty reverberated through her in unexpected ways, creating an ache that was both painful and strangely comforting, a blend of longing and awareness that sometimes life doesn't give clear paths, only moments like this where hearts speak in quiet, intense ways that words often fail to capture. Emma's mind raced. What did this mean for their friendship, for her marriage, for the delicate balance of lives intertwined through love, trust, and loyalty? Yet the fear was tempered by the undeniable emotional connection she felt, a recognition of depth, care, and respect she hadn't realized existed in this form before. She recalled subtle gestures he had made over the years, the way he listened when she spoke about her dreams or fears, the small acts of thoughtfulness, the ease with which he made her laugh even in tense moments, and now each memory shimmered with new significance, a quiet revelation that made her heart both lighter and heavier at once. Michael continued, his voice soft but steady, "I'm not asking for anything to change between us, not for us to act differently, but I needed you to understand that this side of me exists, that my respect, my admiration, and yes, my feelings for you, have always been more than simple friendship." Emma felt a rush of warmth and confusion, a tangle of emotions that made her want to speak, to clarify, to soothe, yet words felt inadequate to convey the depth she now sensed in him and within herself. She gazed at him, seeing the careful honesty, the courage it took to confess feelings that might never be reciprocated, and a wave of empathy, admiration, and an inexplicable attraction washed over her. The balcony felt smaller, more intimate, as if the night itself was bending around them, pressing in with the weight of shared emotions, gentle yet undeniable, demanding awareness, reflection, and honesty. She shifted slightly, still holding the railing, and Michael followed her subtle movement without closing the space completely, maintaining a boundary that felt respectful yet close enough to feel the warmth of his presence. The air carried the faint scent of jasmine and the distant hum of cars, but it felt secondary to the quiet intensity of the moment, the emotional gravity that made time seem slower, yet every heartbeat more vivid. "I know this is complicated," Michael said quietly, "and I respect everything you feel, everything you're married to, and I would never want to disrupt your life, your happiness, or your peace. I just needed to stop pretending this doesn't exist, to stop hiding the truth from both myself and you." Emma's throat tightened, tears threatening but not falling, as she realized the depth of vulnerability he had shown, the careful consideration in his words, and the emotional honesty that demanded recognition even without action or change. She remembered all the laughter, the quiet moments of understanding, the small yet meaningful glances that had passed unnoticed before, and suddenly they felt profound, charged with a subtle romantic energy she had not anticipated, leaving her both frightened and exhilarated. The night stretched on, holding them in a fragile embrace of silence, thought, and unspoken possibilities. Each second was a blend of reflection, tension, and emotional intimacy that neither had expected but could no longer ignore. Emma felt the pull of his gaze, the sincerity of his confession, the gentleness with which he approached her heart, and she realized that what he shared was not reckless or impulsive. It was a profound act of honesty, courage, and emotional connection that would leave a lasting impression on her, no matter what happened next. She took a deep breath, letting the night air fill her lungs, trying to process the intensity of the emotions swirling around her, the undeniable connection, the careful balance between admiration, longing, respect, and the gentle spark of something tender and romantic that neither could yet define. Michael's eyes never wavered. He waited, not pressing, not demanding, simply existing in this shared space with her, offering the truth of his heart, and in that quiet, Emma felt the weight of choice, reflection, and the possibility that even words alone could transform how people see each other, how emotions unfold, and how hearts connect quietly yet powerfully in a single moment. The balcony became their sanctuary, the city lights a soft backdrop to a confession that would linger in memory, the night itself a witness to the depth of human emotion, vulnerability, and the delicate, compelling pull between two people who had shared years of friendship, laughter, and subtle understanding, and now stood on the edge of something unspoken yet profoundly transformative, knowing that this moment, the soft intensity, the careful honesty, the fluttering hearts, would remain etched in their minds long after the city returned to its ordinary rhythm, and long after they had to navigate life's choices, relationships, and the tender complexity of emotions awakened on a quiet balcony under a vast, star-strewn sky. Here's part 4 expanded into a fast-paced, emotional, single-paragraph story of about 1,000 words, simple English, clean, suitable for YouTube storytelling. Emma took a deep breath, the cool night air filling her lungs as the tension on the balcony slowly softened, and she realized that the emotional storm between her and Michael had shifted into something quieter, gentler, yet profoundly significant, a shared understanding that didn't need to be defined in words but could be felt deeply in the chest, in the heart, and in the subtle warmth of presence. The city below sparkled with 1,000 lights, each one like a witness to their conversation, reflecting softly in their eyes, and for the first time that night, Emma felt a strange sense of peace settle over her as she processed the intensity of what had been shared. Michael's gaze remained fixed on her, steady, calm, and yet there was a vulnerability there that tugged at her soul, a reminder that honesty often comes with weight but also with freedom, and in his eyes, she saw relief, hope, and a quiet kind of trust that he had placed entirely in her hands without expectation, only the desire to speak the truth he had carried for so long. "Thank you for telling me," she whispered finally, her voice soft, barely rising above the gentle hum of the night, and she could see a flicker of emotion pass over his face, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and a subtle joy that he had not anticipated but deeply appreciated. The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of acknowledgement, of validation, of understanding, and for a moment, the air between them was no longer heavy with uncertainty but lightened by the shared recognition of what had passed and what had been admitted. She shifted slightly, leaning against the railing again, noticing the way Michael's shoulders relaxed, the tension in his jaw softening, and the small, almost imperceptible smile that curved his lips, a sign that honesty, even when difficult, could bring comfort, closure, and perhaps the quiet beginning of something tender and meaningful that didn't need to be rushed or labeled. "I just needed to be honest," he said softly, almost to himself, yet meant for her ears, and the simplicity of his words struck Emma in a profound way. Sometimes the bravest, most intimate gestures in life are not grand declarations or dramatic acts, but the quiet, deliberate choice to reveal the truth, to trust another with the vulnerability of the heart. The night stretched around them like a cocoon, carrying the distant sounds of the city, faint traffic, and occasional laughter from neighboring apartments, yet all of it felt secondary to the emotional connection they now shared, an invisible bond forged in the subtle bravery of confession, the recognition of feelings, and the gentle understanding that not all emotions require immediate action to matter deeply. Emma's mind wandered through the past, reflecting on the years of friendship, the quiet support, the shared moments of laughter, the subtle gestures that had once seemed ordinary, and she now saw them anew, imbued with meaning, tenderness, and the emotional resonance that only truth can bring, leaving her both moved and contemplative, aware that life's most meaningful moments often unfold in silence, observation, and heartfelt acknowledgement rather than dramatic events. Michael glanced at the city below, then back at her, a flicker of hesitation crossing his features, and she understood that he, too, was weighing the delicate line between vulnerability and respect, between the emotions they now shared and the boundaries life had imposed. Yet in that moment, nothing felt more important than the honesty they had exchanged, the emotional clarity they had achieved, and the quiet intimacy that lingered in the space between them. Emma smiled slightly, the warmth in her chest spreading, a gentle reassurance that she understood, that she felt the depth of what he had shared, and that while life would continue with its routines, obligations, and responsibilities, this moment would remain a luminous memory, a tender imprint of connection, trust, and emotional openness that neither of them would forget. The night seemed to hold its breath with them, the stars above twinkling softly, and the faint rustle of the wind through nearby trees added a rhythm to the stillness, marking time without rushing it, allowing the two of them to simply exist in the shared experience of honesty, reflection, and quiet understanding. "I'll always respect what we have," Emma whispered, her voice carrying the gentle weight of reassurance, and she saw the faint sparkle of relief in Michael's eyes, a recognition that the emotional courage he had shown had not been in vain, that it had been received with empathy, care, and consideration for the delicate balance of lives, love, and loyalty. The balcony, once just a simple space overlooking the city, had transformed into a sanctuary of emotional truth, intimacy, and quiet reflection, a place where hearts had spoken without words, where vulnerability had been met with understanding, and where the possibility of connection lingered, tender, respectful, and quietly powerful. Michael nodded slightly, his expression softening further, the tension that had marked his posture earlier replaced by calm acceptance, and Emma felt a sense of completion, of closure, and yet of ongoing possibility, a recognition that life moves forward but the moments of honesty and connection they had shared would remain etched in memory, shaping how they saw each other and how they understood the quiet beauty of human emotion. The night deepened, the city lights twinkled like distant promises, and Emma realized that some moments, no matter how brief, carry the power to change perception, to stir the heart, and to leave a lasting imprint that does not need to be acted upon immediately, only felt, reflected upon, and treasured as part of the intricate tapestry of life, friendship, and the subtle intimacy that sometimes blossoms quietly in unexpected places. Michael took a small step back, giving her space, and the delicate balance of proximity and respect spoke volumes, a silent acknowledgement that the moment had reached its natural pause, yet it would linger in memory, a quiet, enduring warmth in the heart that neither time nor distance could erase. Emma turned slightly to look at him, catching the faint, almost shy smile that lingered, and she felt a quiet sense of gratitude, not just for his honesty, but for the gentle, emotional depth of the connection they now shared, a bond forged in sincerity, vulnerability, and respect that transcended the ordinary rhythms of life, leaving both of them quietly changed, softly moved, and intimately aware of the richness of human emotion when shared without expectation or haste. The night carried on, unhurried, and in the stillness, Emma and Michael stood together on the balcony, hearts quietly tethered by truth, eyes reflecting the glow of the city, and the gentle understanding that sometimes, the most profound moments of intimacy are not measured by what is done, but by what is spoken, felt, and received with care, leaving a soft, enduring imprint that shapes the soul, warms the heart, and quietly whispers of possibilities, connection, and the subtle, enduring power of emotional honesty under a starry sky. White heavy checkmark Part 4 complete, single paragraph, 1,000 words, fast-paced, emotional resolution, clean, romantic tension, YouTube-safe storytelling. The full story is now complete across all 4 parts, each with natural progression, emotional depth, and subtle romantic tension, suitable for narration or YouTube storytelling. If you want, I can also condense all 4 parts into a single, flowing story ready for narration, keeping hooks, pacing, and emotional impact perfect for a YouTube audience. Do you want me to do that? White heavy checkmark Part 3 complete, single paragraph, 1,000 words, fast-paced, emotionally intense, romantic tension, clean, YouTube safe. I can now write Part 4 in the same style, delivering a heartfelt, dramatic, yet clean resolution with emotional closure and a gentle romantic tone. Do you want me to do that next? White heavy checkmark Part 2 complete, single paragraph, 1,000 words, fast-paced, emotional, romantic tension, clean, suitable for YouTube narration. If you want, I can now do Part 3 in the same style, where the emotional pull intensifies and the story becomes more dramatic and romantic, still keeping it classy. Do you want me to continue with Part 3? White heavy checkmark This is Part 1, fast-paced, emotional, single paragraph, 1,000 words, clean, and keeps the YouTube storytelling tone intact. If you want, I can also expand Part 2 in the same style, keeping the emotional tension rising and building the soft romantic pull for the listener. Do you want me to do that next?